There was intermittent firing last night and today morning. It was probably firing from artillery. The artillery shells and rockets were firing on the outskirts of Kyiv. We could hear intermittent firing all the time in the night and in today morning. But as far as ground offensives are concerned, the Russian forces have not moved forward on ground, and the reports are they are building up defenses now to take care of any kind of counteroffensive coming from Ukrainian forces to push them back. So the status on ground is more or less like status quo, what it was in last 48 hours. But pounding of the cities, including Kyiv, by artillery, by rockets and by air continues unabated.
Right. A quick word on Russia almost threatening a World War III-like situation if other countries step in. In fact, while Biden is currently in Europe, there's much talk about how Russia is now intending to flex its nuclear muscle, almost a threat going out that you step in, then you will see you will see a situation that you've never seen before. This has been the warning right from the start. But now a Russian minister almost says that, we don't want a World War III-like situation.
See, this is again a part of information warfare from Russian side. They are trying to put pressure. Now, see, there's a very, very important meeting which will decide the course of this war is going to be held in Brussels very soon, which will be attended by President Joe Biden of America and will be virtually attended by Zelensky of Ukraine. So this meeting, the outcome of this meeting will decide the course of this war. And this is a warning before the meeting starts from Russian side so that it can affect what will come out of this meeting and could be put some kind of fear in the NATO members, especially Eastern European members, so that he can influence the outcome of this important NATO meeting. Over to you.
Now, if you can give us an understanding, while bilateral talks are still underway, after 29 days, there seems to be no headway. Which side is refusing to budge? We know on both ends they're adamant, but where is this logjam that we see here?
See, as far as key demands of Russia are concerned, one of the most important demands was the neutral status of Ukraine forever in future. Ukraine has accepted that and have given indications they're willing to talk about it. They're willing not to join NATO in future as well. They're willing to give this guarantee. But the sticking points are Donbass and Crimea. Russia wants Crimea to be accepted part of Russia, and Donbass, that is Donetsk Republic and Lugansk Republic, to be recognized as independent states by Ukraine, which Ukraine is not willing to do. And that remains the biggest sticking point in any kind of negotiations between these two countries. These negotiations did result in some progress when they accepted that 9 humanitarian corridors will be made for people to be evacuated from war zones. And that was a positive thing which came out of these negotiations. But the sticking point still remains, which is Donbass.
Right, Rajesh, thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining us. Rajesh is currently in Kyiv, the capital city, which has also come under heavy fire. We're seeing 29 days of relentless Russian attacks on Ukraine. Russia continues to up its offensive against the country. In fact, bloodbath continues on the streets of Ukrainian cities. The city of Mariupol has now been devastated as some parts of the city has become ghost towns after multiple shelling reported in several residential areas, bringing down those buildings to mere debris. A massive explosion was also reported from Ukrainian port, Berdyansk. Black smoke engulfed the port, and according to reports, a warehouse with ammunition and fuel was destroyed. Reports have also suggested that a Russian ship sank. 2 others were on fire while trying to escape. The city of Chernihiv paints a picture of devastation, broken buildings, smoke that's emanating from those small houses. The city of Kharkiv remains one of the worst hit, with attacks from all corners, charred buildings, commercial establishments showing the significant amount of damage that was caused to the city. But Ukraine's valiant fight back continues. Ukraine claims over 12,000 Russian soldiers are in and around Kyiv region, out of which 3,000 soldiers are almost surrounded, whereas 4,000 odd soldiers have been cut off to unpleasant places.
Господи, за что это все? Посмотрите.
Пиздец, ну, бля.
Вот так вот выглядит сейчас наша Барабашова. Ребята, просто какой-то ужас.
All right, I'm cutting across to Yurash, who's a Ukrainian MP joining me right here. Yurash, appreciate your time. Yurash, 29 days and no signs of this war coming to an end. Where do you see this war headed towards? Do you have hope at this point?
Of course. I mean, we're seeing our defiance result in Russian stop their advance, Russian advance has stalled, and as far as seeing the idea that we have for the future, it's very clear. We are aiming for one thing: Russia leaving us alone, and Russia letting us choose the future that we will choose. The point here is that Russian reserves are running out. They are forced to try and get various mercenaries from around the world, while we have no end of recruits in sight. Ukrainians are united as ever to defy the Russian aggression in every step of the way.
But Yurash, we see that Ukrainians themselves, many of them, millions of whom have fled the country, see no future in Ukraine any longer. We see most of those establishments there, your infrastructure coming down to rubble. Most of those key cities have been almost destroyed. At a time like this, civilians barely have faith and hope that they could have a bright future in the country of Ukraine. What would you want to say to them, those who are really concerned, to come back?
The opposite of that. The interviews and the conversation I have with various people who are outside the country have one thing that they wish for and hope for and dream of, is coming back to their country and trying to build back our nation. And as far as the question of rebuilding of our nation, we will deal with that when time comes. But again, at this point in time, we have no other choice but to continue the battle until we win.
All right, you say it with conviction that you will win. Of course, this is the spirit that you've got to keep up. And we hear that Ukrainians have been putting up stiff resistance. At least 12,000 Russian troops is what you've killed. This is a claim that Ukraine has made, but Russia has so long has not admitted, and also given out an official figure of about 458 who've been killed so far in this war. Furthermore, calls all your claims as baseless. At a time like this, we also hear Moscow representatives say that we don't want to use force beyond what we already are. We're waiting for some kind of reconciliation. We are armed and we are ready to take over if things do not come to a resolve. That's Russia's stance.
Well, it's all lies, obviously. Russia banned every single independent media in Russia. Russia destroyed the chance for Russians to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any other independent means of trying to distribute information. Total lies is the situation with the Russian information space. And as far as the situation on the ground, you can watch the videos yourself. It's all available of us destroying numerous tank columns, taking prisoners in their thousands, the Russians in Ukraine who don't know why they're here anyway, and showing the world that, again, in this fight, Russia is losing badly, losing more people than they lost in 10 years of war in Afghanistan. But the point here is that, again, we are fighting for our country. We have no other country to go to. This is the battle we cannot lose because, again, we are committed to this country as nobody else shall be committed to it. We were born in this country. So no matter what Russians throw at us, we will stand firm and fight. Because, again, our ancestors survived much, much worse in the past. What choice do we have but to appreciate that and fight for that gift of theirs?
You know, Yurash, we understand the sentiment that you've attached with the country. You're born there. It's your motherland. You will fight for it. At this time, do you feel weak at all? We know that Russia's might in terms of military arms and ammunition, their sophisticated weaponry in their arsenal, cannot be matched by Ukraine. But are you getting adequate help from those Western nations? Joe Biden is in Europe. He's having a talk with all of the European leaders. Does that really give you some sense of security?
Well, again, we are putting that weaponry, those supplies to good use in trying to dislodge Russians from our country. But again, we have a situation where we basically have our fighting second biggest army in the world. And yes, you're right. The odds should not be in our favor. But the reality is Russia's proving to be a giant on clay legs. And we are pushing them from the pedestal time and time again, showing how empty those threats of Russia's are and how much of a bluff its conversation with the world is.
Right. Yurash, today, after 29 days, we understand that Russia shows no signs of de-escalating. They're waiting for some kind of step down from Ukraine. Is there any talk amongst your government, the people of your government, to try and end this war at the earliest, and maybe for the future of your people and the safety of your own, you step down on one of your demands. Is there a possibility for that?
We have one demand: Russia to leave us alone. That's our demand. Russia to leave our nation alone. That's our demand. One and only demand. And let us decide our future, our independence, what to do with our independence and our integrity. As far as Russian demands, they basically are for destruction of my nation. I am a member of the parliament, and I guarantee you the parliament shall never agree to any of those points that Russia throws at us. They have to shoot every single one of us if they want our country to submit. Again, the parliament will never accept loss of our territorial integrity, sovereignty, or independence. There is no other demand but for Russia to leave us alone. And that's reasonable.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Yurash. Really appreciate your time for joining us and giving us an understanding. Ukrainians, of course, with conviction, say that they will stand through this. And really all heart going to those civilians who are bearing the brunt of this. And it's been nearly a month now since this war began in Ukraine. Troops say they are conducting successful counterattacks against Russian positions in cities on the outskirts of Kyiv. British intelligence has now added that Zelensky's troops probably have already liberated Makariv and Moshchun region, adding that there is possibility that Ukrainian forces will surround Russian units in Bucha and Irpin. Ukraine the presidential office has said that out of 12,000 Russian soldiers, as many as 7,000 are either almost surrendered. In fact, many of them have been cut off. These are claims coming in from the Ukrainian army. NATO, meanwhile, has said in an estimation that 7,000 to 15,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in 4 weeks of this war in Ukraine. These reverses have probably been denied. Moscow there almost showing signs of victory while denying all reports of any counterattacks on their troops. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the early hours of February 24th, sparking the biggest war on European states since the World War II. In the months since the invasion began, more than 10 million people have been displaced. Several Ukrainian towns and cities have been besieged, bombarded beyond recognition. Hundreds of civilians have been killed. As it now braces for a second month of bombing, destruction and deaths, here's what you need to know.
Bullied and subjected to genocide by Kyiv regime for 8 years.
It all started with an early morning broadcast that stunned the world. The future of millions of Ukrainians changed with the blink of an eye. Now, a month and counting, Ukraine has survived ruthless bombing, brutal attacks, and endless hellscape. Russian forces are struggling to capture key Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and Kharkiv. Kyiv still stands firm. Heavily outnumbered and outmuscled, yet Ukraine is giving them a bloody nose.
I thank everyone who acts in support of Ukraine, in support of freedom, but the war continues. The acts of terror against peaceful people go on. 1 month already. That long. It breaks my heart, hearts of all Ukrainians and every free person on the planet.
The war has spared no one. Toddlers, kids, youngsters, elderly, all victims. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, over 10 million people have fled their homes, mostly women and children. With each passing hour, Ukraine war is fast becoming the fastest growing humanitarian crisis Europe has seen since the Second World War. Diplomatic efforts are on to secure a ceasefire, and yet reports of civilian deaths in Ukrainian cities continue to make headlines. Once a bustling, lively and colorful country, many Ukrainian cities are becoming ghost towns. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, US President Joe Biden is on a 4-day trip to Europe amid no end to Russian hostilities in Ukraine. Biden is currently in Brussels, Europe, to reaffirm Western alliances amid Russian aggression. Biden will be heading to Poland on Friday. The US President will attend NATO, G7 and European Union summits. He is also expected to impose new sanctions against Russia during his visit. Western nations will warn Russian President Vladimir Putin that his country will pay ruinous costs for invading Ukraine. Now, during an unprecedented one-day trio of NATO, G7 and EU summits, this is the word that was spoken, hectic day of summitry to maintain Western unity will kick off at the Transatlantic Defense Alliance's headquarters in Brussels, where leaders will agree to ramp up military forces on Europe's east NATO. Now, we're seeing that NATO will also agree to send Kyiv equipment to defend against biological, chemical and nuclear attacks. This is the consensus they have come on. The resolve now to punish Moscow with massive sanctions will be underlined by an emergency meeting of the G7 advanced economies, including Japan. Now, as the threat of an all-out war in Europe escalates, the United States has now stationed its troops closer to the Ukrainian border. We visited Marke in Mina Zamost County, which is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine, where we saw American troops, Humvees, armored carriers and radar systems being deployed there. Here's our exclusive ground report.
The military tents that you see behind me are the new American camps that have come up. We are about 300 kilometers from Poland's capital, Warsaw. We are currently in a place called Mokre Jamosh. This is an airfield. And if you notice in this airfield, there are a number of tents that have come up. These tents are the new American airbase that's been set up in Poland. Now, there are a large number of American troops who are now deployed in this area. Now, if you look just behind me there, that entire green cover are American military tents. They have American military hardware, from armored personnel carriers to Humvees to certain radars that have been set up to troop carriers that have come up in this area. And they've come up from mid-March to now, and the numbers are increasing. This is an airfield. That's the airfield. This is the Mokre Jamosh airfield. This is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine's border. And civilian movement in this area is now restricted. This entire area is not only barricaded, but you have American troops deployed at every entrance to this airfield. Now, are these American troops here as part of a North Atlantic Treaty Organization country NATO military exercise? They started coming here. The initial troops or the pioneers came in between mid to end February, and the larger number of troops are still coming in. We spoke to some of these soldiers, but they said they're not cleared to speak to media about the nature of the deployment or the duration of the deployment in Poland, close to the border with Ukraine. But there are radars that are here, there are Humvees that are here, and there are certain other military hardware that is coming in to this area, is what locals tell India Today. US President Joe Biden is also to fly in to Warsaw for talks with Poland. Now, while that is a lot to do also with humanitarian assistance that will be provided to Poland for Poland looking after more than 2 million refugees who've come in from Ukraine. But Poland is also looking for additional military hardware, from surface to air missiles to fighter jets from the United States, and more troops on ground. America did commit to about 3,000 additional troops being sent here. 7,000 American troops as part of rotation are in the NATO territory right now. But Poland wants more to strengthen its security, especially with Russian missiles falling very close to Poland's border with Ukraine. With cameraman Lalit Joshi in Poland, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.